Great, thank you. I'm Patrice Tedisco, the Executive Director of Freedom's Way National Heritage Area, and I'm happy to welcome you here this afternoon with the sun out, which is amazing, to our webinar on our Partnership Grant Program. And myself and Desiree Dembski-Hamlin, the Deputy Director of Freedom's Way, will be presenting this afternoon. And the process will be, I will provide an introduction to the grants program and some information about the categories and some of the things that you might need to know as you formulate your ideas. And Desiree is going to walk you through the mechanics of submitting a grant and all of the nuts and bolts that you need to understand all the different pieces that go into the grant package. This session is being recorded. It will be made available to you in the coming days. A copy of the slides from this will also be placed on our website in the future at freedomsway.org grants, and we'll send a follow-up email to let you know when all of that material is available. We welcome your questions at the end of the presentation, or if you have them during the presentation, you're welcome to put them into the question and answer feature. I would ask that you try to have your questions talk about the presentation and the general overview of the grant program and not focus on specific aspects of a grant that you are hoping to submit or planning to submit. If you have those very detailed questions, I will suggest that you reach out to us and engage us in a private conversation about the nuts and bolts of your individual grants. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. There are a lot of names on the list of folks that are new to us, and that's terrific. So if you feel comfortable introducing yourself in the chat and letting us know who you are and the organizations you represent, that would be terrific as well. So let's just get started and see how it goes. I'm hoping that most of you know about Freedom's Way National Heritage Area, but should you not know about us, I please ask that you go to our website, www.freedomsway.org, where you're going to find everything that you need to know about the background of the organization and the work that we do. Very briefly, we are one of 60 national heritage areas in the United States. It is a growing program. There's a lot of enthusiasm for national heritage areas, and there are more and more national heritage areas coming online even as I speak. We serve 45 towns and communities or cities in Massachusetts and New Hampshire, and we work in partnership with the National Park Service, who fund the program, or the funding comes through the National Park Service, I should say, as our funds are allocated in a federal appropriation process annually. We work in partnership and collaboration with the organizations and the individuals and the communities in this region to promote, protect, interpret, enhance the natural, cultural, and historical resources. The Partnership Grant Program, which came out of our management planning process in 2015, provides strategic investments in the resources that enhance the region's sense of place. And we are all about sense of place, and that's a big part of the work that we do in Freedom's Way to help communities identify and interpret and tell the stories about their particular places and their particular histories. This is a program that is designed to be a catalyst for new and creative projects and programs. It is not meant to take the place of funding that would be in your annual budget for something that happens over and over again. That's a basic annual operating cost or a program. However, if there is a program that you want to expand, you have a new idea, and there's something that you want to think about in a new creative way, don't hesitate to reach out to us and have a conversation about that. And this is a collaborative process. It is not designed to be a competitive grant process, which makes our grant program a little bit different than some other programs that you might apply to. We ourselves, as I said, the idea of a grant program came out of our 2015 management plan. Again, that document is on our website, and I encourage you, if you have the time, to take a look at it, because a lot of the language in that document could be useful to you in writing a grant, because there's lots of things in there that articulate the goals, the mission, and the focus of our work. And so take a look at the management plan. But it basically tells us that this is the association, which is the Freedom's Way Heritage Association, will provide support and technical assistance for stewardship in this heritage area through this small grants program. We will also support the missions and programming of existing interpretive attractions. This year in 2024, we've allocated $75,000, and that's $25,000 up from last year. We typically try to allocate 10% of the funding that we receive from the National Park Service to the grant program. And this year, grants can be awarded up to $7,500, which is an increase from last year. The online applications are due on October 1st, which is right around the corner. They will be reviewed. All of your applications are reviewed and awarded on a rolling basis until all the obligated funds have been committed. And that's a really crucial thing to remember. It's great to get a grant in October because that's right at the beginning of the process. If your project, if that does not work for you and that is not within a time frame that you have, that you're thinking of doing, don't fret. Send us something if there's something that comes up in January. Don't feel that that's going to be a detriment to you receiving funding. Typically, we have not expended all of the funds we've allocated in a given year. So typically there's funds available throughout the year, but of course, it's always best to get them in as soon as possible. Projects need to be completed by September 1st, 2024. Our fiscal year ends in September 30th, and that allows us enough time to process the grants. Funding priorities. Really, what we are hoping to do with this program is to facilitate meaningful interpretive experiences that engage diverse audiences and support an inclusive and comprehensive narrative of the region's history, including that of Indigenous peoples, women, people of color, and other underrepresented communities. If you have a project that is not, strictly speaking, addressing this particular population, do not hesitate to submit that project because, of course, every project is evaluated on its own merit. But these funding priorities should not surprise anybody because, indeed, this is the focus of many of our partners' work. We also wish to broaden the understanding of the themes and stories relating to the American Revolution. And so, again, I encourage you to go onto our website where you will see all of the work that we're currently doing around 2025. The American Revolution in this region, of course, is very central to the stories, but also central to this particular category is projects and programs that provide fresh interpretations and perspectives that explore the different meanings and impacts of the American Revolution, including those related to what we call collective memory, memorialization, civic and social engagement, and political discourse. And we are ourselves embarking on a year-long project on memorials, monuments, memorials, and markers in the heritage area. So we encourage people to think about projects in that, if you will, under that category. We also wish to cultivate a shared stewardship agenda for this region through historic preservation, conservation, and curation initiatives that interpret, enhance, and preserve the natural and cultural resources of the region for current and future generations. So what do we fund? So these are the categories that currently are in the grants program. And you'll probably, as we'll go through those, you'll see that there is a little bit of overlap between some of these. And don't fret once again, because if you have a question about a category, if you submit a grant in a certain category and it's not necessarily in the right place, that does not mean the grant won't get funded. It simply means we'll have a conversation with you. We'll say, do you think it might fit in a better place? But this is, again, nothing here is set in stone. These are the general templates that we work within, and we're always willing to understand more fully what your ideas are. So inclusive storytelling, education, interpretation, and curation, community planning and resource conservation, historic preservation, regional cultural events, and there you see revolutionary stories with its asterisk, because as I said, we are really focusing or hoping that our partners will be focusing on this in the next 2 years. So let's talk a little bit about some of the projects we funded this year, and with a few concrete examples. Inclusive storytelling. Projects in this category currently have between $1,000 and $3,500 is the funding range, so up to $3,500. And these are projects that document, interpret, and share the stories of the region with an emphasis on those. who have been excluded from the historical narrative. They also support, this particular category supports research, documentation, interpretation of these stories, as well as the creation of interpretive products, such as waysides, web content, videos, exhibits, oral histories, podcasts, blogs, and the development of programs that share these stories with the community. So the two examples you see here on the left is the Arlington Historical Society's monument, the Enslaved and Free Persons of Color Monument. It's in the Arlington's old burying ground. And this was created to acknowledge the enslaved and free persons of color who are buried there, who have in the past been unacknowledged. The project was designed to promote racial justice, diversity, and inclusion through this physical marker that recognized the burial ground's history and acknowledges all of Arlington's people, persons of color. And this was unveiled this year on Juneteenth. On the right, you see the Black Heritage Trail of New Hampshire's installation and unveiling event for the Black Heritage Trail marker in Milford, New Hampshire, honoring Harriet E. Wilson. The Black Heritage Trail of New Hampshire promotes awareness and appreciation of African Americans' history and life through tours, events, and research projects. This marker, which was installed, when was this? June, I believe, as well, honors Harriet E. Wilson. She was a spiritualist, a speaker, and she was the author of Old Nig, the first novel published in the United States by a Black woman. Here we see the we see the Mass Central Railroad historic mileage marker for the Clinton Greenway Conservation Trust. This was installed by the Clinton Greenway Conservation Trust to explain the purpose of that you see the granite marker there, the 1903 granite pillar. And this is along the Clinton section of the Mass Central Railroad pathway. And it details how engineers would use these pillars and their markings to gauge their speed, their time, and their destination. Community planning and resource conservation grants, $1,000 to $7,000. And oh, I'm sorry, you know what I did not do? I did not tell you that education and interpretation grants are $1,000 to $3,500 in categories. Sorry about that. Community planning and resource conservation grants are $1,000 to $7,500. These are projects that plan for or promote historic preservation or natural resource and agricultural conservation. And they also preserve or enhance historical structures, landscapes, and cultural resources of the heritage area. These grants support undertaking of studies, such as, but not limited to, resource inventories, historic structures, reports and assessments, historical landscape reports, assessments of preservation plans, planning and feasibility studies, and visitor surveys and analysis. They also, should you wish, they also include implementation of the recommendations, and you'll see on the left-hand side the Hudson Cultural Alliance, who created an accessible outdoor space for artistic and educational opportunities and activities. We funded, in this particular project, we funded some of the planning for the project, and then the project also, some of the construction that they did for the outdoor space supported the planning grant in terms of the match. This is the 1910 landmark in Hudson that's being restored, if it will be brought back to life as a community center for Hudson's downtown. On the right, you see the Lexington Historical Society's preservation of the 1769 Rachel Dwight Gould bed hangings. These are in the Hancock Clark House in Lexington, and they are one of two sets of bed hangings of this quality that exist within the region. They were conserved and restored and reinstalled, and they are being interpreted as part of the narrative of the history of the house. Something that's not on the screen that I just wanted to also point out is that we did fund in Pepperell historic building survey. And I mentioned that because a lot of our communities, or a lot of the communities in the heritage area, this is an area that is under-resourced. And so if you are in a community that has not done a historic building survey, and that's something that you feel is important, and we certainly do feel it is important, That is something that is also fundable in this category. Historic preservation, integral to the identity of the region. These grants are between $1,000 and $7,500, so there's a pretty big range of funding. And these are products that preserve, rehabilitate, or restore historically or culturally significant buildings or sites within the heritage area. These sites are either listed on the National Register of Historic Places individually or part of a district, or they're eligible for and actively seeking listing. They support the implementation of historic structure reports and plans, studies, and other documents that make it feasible to do the work on these structures. They also can support the actual physical rehabilitation or construction. Again, all preservation projects have to consult and meet the federal standards for historic preservation. You see on the left, the Shirley Meeting House. The Shirley Meeting House is the oldest public building in Shirley. I hope you've all been there. It faces their beautiful downtown common, very imposing. And this particular project, what we funded here was we helped support some of the improvements they made to the property to make it handicapped accessible. I'd also like to mention that in this particular case, the project supported or was matched by a Mass Cultural Council facilities grant. And as you're thinking of some of these projects, you can match them with CPA funding is another great example. As long as the funding that matches these projects is not of a federal source. And on the right is Mason, New Hampshire's town hall renovation that we've been involved in now for a couple of years. And this project is work to stabilize the building, to make some necessary repairs to help the building become, if you will, to help preserve the building. But the plans do also include enhancement of the interior and interpretation materials, because this building is very central to the community and the life of this very lovely community and small community. Regional and cultural events. So this is a category, it's between $500 and $1,500. These are typically annual events that attract a regional audience. So this is not your, if your town has a harvest festival or, a spring fest or something that's unique or very centered on your community, it is not a regional cultural event. But we love supporting these projects. So I hope some of you may have some of these up your sleeve. On the left, you see the Friends of Pine Hawk's Fall Program Series. I hope all of you are aware that October is Archaeology Month, and we will be featuring the Friends of Pine Hawk in our e-newsletter. So if you do see that, you'll see all of the events that they offer. But what they offer through the Friends of Pine Hawk it's a fall program centered on local archaeology and Native American topics. And it ranges from seminars and documentary films to workshops, tours, outings, and it provides multiple venues for the public to engage in archaeology and local Indigenous history. On the right is the Nashua Sculpture Symposium, a project we have funded now for, I think, 3 or 4 years, or supported it with this type of a grant. This is a project that brings sculptors sometimes from international sculptures, at least before the pandemic for certain. And they come into the community for a month. They live at times, sometimes with local residents. They create works of art within the community in a very accessible fashion. These sculptures are then sited within the community on a permanent basis. And this month-long program really engages the community in thinking about art and culture. And in this particular case, this last year, the theme of this was Voices to the Future. We also funded the Nashua International Sculpture Symposium this year with an education and interpretation grant to develop community programming for teenagers. So I tell you that because it's not typically something that we do, because regional cultural events are unique in and of themselves, but a lot of these large events have a lot of moving components and parts to them. So always think about, the different pieces that you're putting together and how we might support your work. Back to revolutionary stories. Again, I can't say enough about this. But the first thing I must say is that if you do apply for a Revolutionary Stories grant, it does not preclude you from applying for a grant in another category. So I have to make that clear that you can actually apply for 2 grants if one of them is a Revolutionary Stories grant. And again, this is a grant category that's unique to the next 2 years. You can use it to support research, documentation, and preliminary interpretation of stories that will lay the foundation for programs and projects that relate to the American Revolution. So we have 2 examples here. On the left, you see a picture from the Concord Museum, where we're having our annual meeting. So I have to put a plug in for our annual meeting, which is going to be held on November 5th at the Concord Museum. And we're calling it an annual meeting and community gathering this year, because we want people to come and talk to each other and meet each other and tell each other what they're doing and tell us what you're doing as well. And then you can tell us what we should be doing. So please come. But the Concord Museum has, in this particular case, partnered with the Robbins House in Concord as well, another wonderful partner that we've had the pleasure of funding in the past. And what they do with the funding is, this is a paid internship designed to provide students of color with experience in the museum and public history fields. This past summer, this is Jazz that you see here with David Wood, Concord's eminent historian. And this summer, she focused on researching and interpreting a story about that desk, which was owned by John Cummings, he enslaved Brister Freeman. So you may have heard of Brister Freeman's woods in Concord. Well, Brister Freeman was enslaved by John Cumming. He then himself was emancipated, Brister Freeman, that is, through his service in the American Revolutionary War. And so what they did here was she interpreted this particular item through the lens of Brister Freeman, and her interpretation is now part of the permanent interpretation of that item in the museum. On the right is the Westford Historical Society and Museum, and the Westford Historical Society and Museum have created a multifaceted tour of the West Lawn Cemetery. And what they have done is they have created an interactive digital map that talks about the veterans, the Revolutionary War veterans that are buried there, and that is on their website. And you can access this place-based programming through their website, but also you can go to the cemetery. They've got historical QR codes, so you can listen to a digitized tour while you're in the space. They also use it to do interpretation and programming, and every year, on April 19th, 2023, they hold a candlelight tour. This is what you can see here in the cemetery, but all this information that they've amassed about how to tell the story and really try to connect people to the lives of these are real people. These were real people that were in the American Revolutionary War. They all have backstories. It's really to humanize the event, to draw the public into understanding sort of all of the different perspectives of the American Revolution. Our impact. We are a small but mighty organization. Since the program was developed right after, it's between 2015 and 2016, we've awarded 89 grants totaling $164,000. And so I would point out that if you say, wow, this year you have $75,000 available, that means that you've got to pump out quite a few grants. I would also say that our funding has increased each year, and the percentage of our budget that we've allocated for these grants each year has increased as well. We have funded projects in 2/3 of our 45 communities. So if you are in that 1/3 that we've not funded, please do us a favor and submit a proposal, because we try very, very hard to support all of our partners and all of our communities. We've generated $2.1 million in match, and Desiree is going to explain the magic, or how that happens. And we've leveraged NPS funding 11 to 1. And we always are trying to leverage that funding, because that's how we go hand in hand to get our annual allocations for funds from Congress. So we are a partnership endeavor, and I cannot say this enough times. Everything that we do in our work is about collaborating and supporting our partners. This is not a traditional grant program, and so I must, say that you see two people here on the screen. Every grant is reviewed and read by the both of us. We circle back with you for questions, and it's not your traditional grant process. You are not anonymous to us. We are not anonymous to you. You do not drop a grant into an envelope and send it off into the mail and get a response and never know who the person was that read it. So I tell you this because it is a partnership endeavor. We work very hard to be collaborative with you and to meet the needs of our communities. We will acknowledge you at our annual meeting, and this year our annual meeting, as I said, is at the Concord Museum on November 5th, and we will have 3 presentations from grant partners from 2023. The West Lawn, Westford is going to be presenting that project, and Richard Duffy's going to be presenting the Arlington project that you saw in Arlington. And we have someone from Stowe, we will have somebody from Stowe talking about a wonderful project they're doing to bring to light the history of the Mapledale Golf Club, one of the first golf clubs for African Americans in Massachusetts, and the site of some very important tournaments. Your projects will be shared with the National Park Service. They will be shared with each other. We will highlight them on our e-newsletter. We will make them available far and wide, just as we hope you'll support us. And that said, I'd like to thank you for joining us and turn it over to Desiree, who is going to tell you what you need to do prior to you applying and right throughout the process.
Thank you, Patrice. So now that you know a bit about the heritage area and the evolution of our partnership grant program, let's get into the nuts and bolts of how to prepare a proposal and what to expect if awarded a grant. All of the material I will be covering is outlined in the program guidelines available on the grants page of our website and will be provided in the follow-up materials to this webinar. Eligible applicants must be one of the following: a 501c3 nonprofit organization, such as a historical society, land trust, museum, etc., a municipality or state agency, and this includes municipal committees and commissions with the town or city's permission, or a public academic institution. We are happy to accept proposals from community groups that do not have their 501c3 status if they have secured a fiscal agent to accept the grant funds on their behalf at the conclusion of the project. And just a note that should an organization serve as the fiscal agent for another group, that does not preclude that organization for applying for a grant for themselves and their own work. In addition to the 2024 funding priorities and opportunities that Patrice shared earlier, successful proposals will align with the goals of the Freedom's Way Partnership Grant Program as identified in its management plan. These are to inspire generations of lifelong learners through innovative educational and interpretive initiatives that connect stories, past and present, to residents and visitors, to foster a culture of stewardship to preserve the heritage area's natural, historical, and cultural resources as a legacy for future generations, to promote sustainable communities that reinforce the heritage area's character and sense of place, and to engage and collaborate with organizations, interests, and individuals to create a shared regional vision as a living link across landscapes, history, and time. Eligible projects must impact at least one of the 45 communities in the heritage area encompasses. An interactive map is available on our website by clicking Area Map in the menu bar at the top of every page. As Freedom's Way is required to match the funds it receives from the National Park Service, projects seeking funding through the Partnership Grant Program must demonstrate the ability to match the requested amount at a minimum of 2 to 1. So if the proposal is for a $3,500 grant, the project budget must account for how at least $7,000 of matching funds will be attained. We'll look closer at the matching requirement later in the presentation. However, it is important to note that match can be cash, in kind, or any combination thereof. Finally, it is preferred that proposals for 2024 funding are anticipated to be complete by September 1st of next year. For projects that have multiple discrete phases, perhaps over multiple years, it's preferred that the phase which relates to the expenses that this grant cycle would reimburse be complete by September 1st. A thorough proposal will focus on the relevant phase for this cycle while offering supporting context for the entire scope of the project. Should you have questions or concerns regarding your project's timeline, please just reach out to us and we can discuss the best way forward. Once you've determined that you're eligible to apply and your project aligns with the goals and priorities of the Partnership Grant Program, please review the program guidelines and application materials on the grants page of our website, and we encourage you to send an email to grants@freedomsway.org introducing your project and letting us know your availability to schedule a call to discuss. As Patrice noted earlier, it is our desire to provide as much support as possible to our partners through this collaborative process. So you've had the opportunity to discuss your project with us should you wish, and you're ready to prepare a proposal. There are a few things to keep in mind. Freedom's Way partnership grants are reimbursable. So this means that grantees must first pay for project expenses themselves and then submit for reimbursement as part of the final report upon completion of the project. Freedom's Way partnership grants are also matching grants. So this means that grantees must submit documentation with the final report demonstrating that they have contributed at least twice the amount of the grant award to the project. And again, matching funds may be cash, in-kind goods and services, such as volunteer or professional rates, or any combination of the two. And finally, Freedom's Way partnership grants are federal funds. And as such, any and all applicable regulations must be adhered to, and only allowable expenses may be reimbursed. A PDF preview of the online submission form is now available on the grants page of our website. The form itself will become available toward the bottom of that page this Sunday, October 1st. While most of the fields are simple and straightforward, there are 2 questions which require narrative responses. We encourage you to draft those answers in a Word document and copy and paste them into the form when you're ready to submit. This will help minimize any risk of losing your hard work. There are 2 buttons at the bottom of the submission form. The one on the left says submit, and the one on the right says save and continue later. Upon successfully clicking submit, you will see a confirmation pop-up notification, and you will receive an email at the address that you included in the proposal with the contents of your submission. If that does not happen after you've clicked submit, please reach out to us or do not leave that page and try to see if you can submit again. We want to make sure that information comes through. Should you choose to use the Save and Continue feature, you will be prompted to enter an email address. And this is very important to do, as that's how you'll receive the link that will allow you to return to the form for the next 30 days. That email will also contain all of the information you had previously saved for your reference. Please reach out to us if you're experiencing any issues with this feature. And finally, if you have trouble uploading documents as attachments, please send them directly to grants@freedomsway.org and we can add them on the back end. So now my favorite part, let's take a look at the budget template. So this is required to be submitted as an attachment with the proposal. This Excel file is available on the grants page of our website. And upon opening it, you'll notice that there are 2 worksheet tabs along the bottom. The first says template. It's blank, and that's for you to fill out. And the second says example, and that's what we'll go through together now. And that's still in that document for your reference while you're preparing the budget. So you'll see here at the top of this document, there's space to include basic information about your proposal. Please help us by filling this information out. In column B, we've included headings for categories that are applicable to most, if not all, of the projects that seek funding through the Partnership Grant Program, such as professional services, materials and supplies, etc. Applicants are asked to fill out the rows beneath the appropriate categories with information relevant to their project. And we hope this helps you think more broadly about the elements of your project that can also be counted towards the required match. In column C, we've asked you to show us the math you use to arrive at the total cost for a line item. Please note that this document is intended to serve as a preliminary budget. We do understand that you may not have all of the information set in stone when applying, but do ask that you do your best to provide as accurate of an estimate as possible. In column D, funding requests to be reimbursed, this is perhaps the most important column as it breaks down what exactly the grant funds that you're requesting are expected to reimburse at the conclusion of the project. This allows us to ensure the expenses are allowable to reimburse with federal funds. Columns E and F break down line by line how you anticipate matching the funding request. And while a minimum of 2-to-1 match is required, the entire project budget is to be included in this template, as in most cases, it can all be counted as match. And that helps us demonstrate to the National Park Service how the funding through them is leveraged by us through partnerships with the local communities that we serve. So let's look at a couple of examples here. If we look at row 13 under professional services, what this is saying is that there's a consulting project manager anticipated to be part of this project. At $50 an hour for 8 hours a week for 20 weeks, this comes out to about $8,000. So perhaps you've actually received a quote from that consultant for that amount. And you're saying here, hey, Freedom's Way, we could really use $2,000 to help pay for that, but we have $6,000 already in our budget that we can use as match to take care of that. And then over here in the final column, you would then see that $8,000 is the total for that item. Another example, maybe down here in venue, is that you're going to have a launch event for this program that you've designed. And the local library has a room that they typically will charge some organizations to rent. However, for you as a nonprofit, they're donating the space. You can include that as an in-kind match of venue space, and you would include that here in this budget. Okay, and again, of course, as you see here in column G, that will auto sum between the requested funds and the proposed match for each line item, again, to get you that total for each part of the project. You'll notice that the categories here on this slide have changed, as now we've scrolled further down in the budget template file. Expenses in these categories, such as staff time, volunteer time, and mileage, cannot be reimbursed with grant funds, but they are to be included in this document to reflect the entire project, and they must be counted as match here and in the final report. Again, you'll see over in column F that those amounts are included as in kind for the project, in kind match. Okay, so to help get the juices flowing, we've included a list of possible sources of matching funds that may apply to your project and will quickly get you over the 2-to-1 minimum requirement. The first 3 bullets can best be thought of as examples of cash match, such as resources from your operating budget, or perhaps you have cash reserves you'd like to pull in for part of this project. Perhaps you've done some project-specific fundraising that can be used as match, or you've obtained or plan to seek other non-federal grant awards. Again, as Patrice said, CPA, local cultural council, other private granting organizations, they're all great sources of matching funds. And the remaining bullets on this list typically fall under third-party in-kind contributions. The fair market value of materials and supplies can be counted as in-kind match, as can discounted rates for professional services. Say you have a graphic designer who's willing to do the work at a reduced rate for your project. That amount that they're donating, again, can be counted as match. And of course, some other examples here is we cannot reimburse staff time or staff salaries. However, their work towards the project can be counted as match. You may have a group of volunteers, including committees. All of their time can be documented and counted as in-kind match. We already went over venue space, and of course, mileage, if it's not already being reimbursed, can be a source of match as well. Okay. So then at the bottom of the budget template, it will auto sum all of the various columns, and you can get an easy snapshot of your overall project budget and what you're proposing. So you've submitted a proposal. Now what? We review proposals as they're submitted and aim to make awards within 2 weeks. You'll receive an email with an award package or follow-up questions if necessary. The award package includes an agreement, which will need to be signed and returned. And the date that you sign that is the technical start date of the project. Any expenses incurred towards the project or a match that you'll be tracking for the project need to be documented after that start date. This agreement will also stipulate the due date for the final report, which is 8 weeks after the anticipated completion date that you included in your proposal, or September 1st, 2024, whichever comes first. And finally, the grant agreement package will also include copies of our logos to use when promoting your project in the communities, both print and digitally, to help acknowledge support of the project through the Freedom's Way Partnership Grant Program. So you've signed the agreement and your project has begun. So between then and the project's completion, we do ask that you keep us in the loop. If you have updates or events that are happening relating to the project, please share them with us. We're happy to promote them through our networks, and we're of course happy to attend if we're able. Should you encounter any surprises, such as anticipated delays or changes in project personnel, please help keep us apprised of the situation so we can ensure successful completion of the project when September rolls around. So quickly, we'll touch on closing out a grant. Final report guidelines will be sent with the award package as well, and they will be posted on the grants page of our website. We do ask that grantees share a brief narrative that documents their impacts and accomplishments through the projects. And if there are any future plans to continue the work, you could include them there as well. You would include an updated budget template that would reflect the actuals in the project. You would submit documentations of the expenses that will be reimbursed. That could be receipts, canceled checks, bank statements. We can work with you if you have a different situation that requires other documentation. And you would also submit documentation of the attesting to the matching funds. And finally, we do ask that you provide copies of any publicity, whether that's press releases, e-newsletters that help get the word out there about your project, and of course photos of your project so that we can share them with future cohorts and get them out in the community. And finally, the importance of this due date, and as I mentioned, this year is that we're asking final reports to be submitted within 8 weeks after the anticipated completion date stated in your proposal, or September 1st of 2024, whichever comes first. We will consider a single extension request on a case-by-case basis. We do ask that you give us advance notice ahead of September 1st or your deadline and let us know what's going on. And this is all because our fiscal year ends on September 30th, and we do have a lot to do to close out our books and make sure that we're reporting accurately to the National Park Service. And this just really helps us make sure that we can disperse these payments and grants in a timely fashion ahead of that deadline. And as Patrice said, of course, this is a partnership endeavor. We're happy to support you and work with you in any way that we can. So please just feel free to always reach out to us with any question you have. We're here for your help. And with that, we're going to open it up to questions now. Okay.
We do have 3 in the chat and the question and answer here.
Yep, I'm going to open that right now, and let's see. Patrice, if I can read them out, or if you could like to pick one, we can do that as well.
How do we go from top to bottom?
Okay, great. So Jessica Roby from Fitchburg State University asks how we can find similar grant programs in other states, such as Maine, for projects in those regions. Any thoughts, Patrice?
I have no idea, Jessica. I'm sorry to say, although there is a National Heritage Area starting in down East Maine, but they're just at the very earliest stages of development. So I'm sorry, I just can't answer. I don't have a clue. Do you, Desiree?
No, that's what I would say as well. Okay, we have Catherine Coco. Do historic preservation grants have to be on the National Register, or would state register structures qualify?
But what it does say, the language that we have in the program is that they need to be eligible for the National Register. And so we would take a look if there's a particular property that you're interested, please give us a call and we can take a look and see if it's eligible. And then we can talk about the project and see how we could support it if possible.
Jessica Roby had a follow-up question. How to negotiate matching funds that might not be secured until later, or that might change in source and or amount? How might those be presented best in a proposal?
Well, I would suggest, Jessica, that when Desiree went through the funding cycle and you looked at that spreadsheet, you will note that we do have people submit projects with estimated matches. Of course, at the end of the day, when the project is complete, you do have to have that 2-to-1 match, needs to be in place. But should something change internally between the time you apply for a project and the time you close out a project, if you're meeting your 2-to-1 match at a minimum and you're using funds that are appropriate, that shouldn't be an issue. Desiree, would you answer? Is there anything else that you would add to that?
The only thing I would add to that is, sometimes if we see that someone is banking on a large source of match coming from an outside grant that has not yet been secured, but they think they may have that in the bag, they'll forego tracking all of the committee members' time or any of the individuals who are actively working on this project throughout the year. Where that really could have amounted to thousands of dollars of in-kind match. So you're better off trying to track all of that from the beginning, so that you have that as a backup if ultimately you are thinking that large sums of match to meet that requirement would come from a source that you're unsure of. Okay.
Great. And you will see how we're really focusing on this match piece. And again, we need that match to draw down the funding. And so that is why it's so critical and why we're really focusing in on that in this presentation so people understand it, because we do find that a lot of our partners don't understand it. And we do understand that it is a little bit different.
Mm-hmm. And a great follow on to that. So our dear friend Paul Prisbilla asks, so while we may not need volunteer hours for the match, does Freedom's Way benefit from volunteer hours specifically as it does with some of our other programs such as Hidden Treasures? So you did kind of touch on that, Patrice, but is there anything else you'd like to drive home on the topic?
Well, I would only say, yes, I would. I'd like to drive home the fact that when we do our National Park Service reporting, which we do annually, we do a program report, and they ask us how many volunteers we had. They ask how many people. We have to we report on all of these numbers, including how many people volunteer, how many partners we have, how much match they generate. So the more volunteers that we have in the heritage area working on projects, the more our breadth in the region is articulated to the National Park Service. And one of the things about Freedom's Way that makes it quite unique is that we are very grounds up. So our work is really at this level, at the volunteer level in each of these communities. We know so many of you personally. And so the more of you that are volunteering your time, the stronger case we can make to the National Park Service of our value to you and the value of the program.
Great, thank you. So we currently have one more question in the Q&A. I will say that we've got about 9 more minutes on the webinar. So if anything's burning in your mind, please get it into the Q&A now. Someone says that they may have been late, so they might have missed this, but can funds from this grant program be used for an event?
Yes, they can if it's a regional event. So we do have a category. So you'll see this on our website for regional sponsorship. It's not a huge amount of money. It's between $500 and $1,500. But again, these are events that are regional in nature. So if you're a local community and you're having something that is very localized to your community, we would not necessarily be using them, supporting that. However, if it's an event, and I don't know what kind of event you're speaking about, so again, that could get into another conversation, which we're happy to have. But if say that you're having an event that's associated with a program, you could say that the Friends of Pine Hawk, is a tour an event. So, there are places in interpretation education where things that are happening can be funded. So it really is particular to what kind of event you're talking about. So again, reach out to us, have that conversation, and let us know what you're thinking.
Great. Okay. Can part of a project be used to raise funds for a nonprofit?
We are not allowed to use funding for fundraising or development. So I would have to say that no, you could not use funds from this particular program to raise funds for a nonprofit. We can't use them ourselves to raise funds for ourselves. So no, these funds cannot be used for development or fundraising.
Okay. Do you have guidelines, examples for valuing volunteer hours? I'll take this one, Doug. So there's a website called independentsector.org. And for years now, they compile all of this data from across the country. And around April each year, they release a report that establishes the current rate of a volunteer hour in each state. So that is what we use, the Massachusetts rate for each year to establish a volunteer. Moving forward at this time, it is $39.19. That is the value of each hour of volunteer time, which you are completely fine to use in your proposals. And that is included and referenced in the budget template and elsewhere in the guidelines. We touched a little bit upon professional services and volunteers who may be donating their professional services. Those people are allowed to establish their own rate. Assumably, that would be higher than $39.19 for the services that they're providing to the project. That could be graphic design, intensive research, archaeological services, architectural services. Anything like that, it's completely acceptable for those folks to establish their own professional rate. Do we have any last questions? Got just a couple more minutes here. Or Patrice, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I would just like to thank people for joining us. And I think we've made it perfectly clear that our goal through this grant program, and it has evolved over time. And I would also just add, there was a point in time 1 year where it was a competitive grant program. And we thought long and hard about that because this region has organizations that are very diverse in their capacity. And we really felt that it was important to be able to provide resources to our partner organizations, whatever their scale and their capabilities. So we work with very, very small organizations, historical societies that have all volunteer staffs, and we get it. We know how hard it is for you to do this work, but we want to support you. And we know that you are very different than the Concord Museum, who we also support, that has a development staff. And that is the reason that we've restructured the program to work this way. We can't always fund everything that people want us to fund because some things are not allowable under the mandate of our National Park Service agreement. But if we can support work that does fit within our mission and goals and is fundable, we will try our hardest to work with you to accomplish that. So I hope that you understand that this is for us a very collaborative process, and our goal is to be here for you and support your work.
Excellent. And with that, I believe we are done for this afternoon. So thank you all for joining us. Again, this was recorded. We have plenty of materials to share with you. Give us a couple of days and we will get those out via email. And as always, you can reach out to grants@freedomsway.org. Patrice and I both get those emails. And the application will be live on this Sunday, October 1st. So we look forward to hearing from you. Take care.
Enjoy the sunshine and come to our annual meeting as well.
November 5th, Concord Museum. Registration is live on the website now. Take care.